Hello everybody, and welcome to this video where I would like to show you one possible way how you can build a repertoire or even include a line in your existing repertoire. To do this, I will use an example from what I did in the 90s when I was thinking about what to do against the English attack in the Najdorf. The Najdorf has been my number one opening for many years, and especially in the 90s I was playing only the Najdorf. So in that time the English attack was all the rage. So bishop e3 with the idea of f3, g4, g5, queen d2, long castle and so on. Everybody was playing this. So when thinking which line to choose, I employed one method, which is not a surprising one, checking what the best players are doing. Now, in that time, many moves were possible. Actually, all the three ones that are available to black, which are the standard Najdorf move with d5, the Scheveningen option with e6, or the move that was gaining popularity at that time, knight g4, was getting quite attraction. So I was checking all of this, and eventually for example, I quite liked knight g4, but I didn't like the fact that first of all, white can repeat moves, and second, that can be easily avoided by f3. So there is no knight g4. So I was checking the lines of the players that were playing, and then at some point it occurred to me, wait a second, did Fischer ever face this line? I was not actually certain. I thought probably not, because the English attack only became popular in the 80s. So imagine my surprise when I discovered the game Bern Fischer from the Blitz tournament in New York in 1971. I was actually quite surprised that both players followed what was considered theory also in the 90s. So that game went bishop e3, e5, Fischer sticking to the usual Najdorf move, knight b3, bishop e7, f3, short castle, queen d2, bishop e6, long castle, knight d7, g4, b5, g5. And now, comparing to the theory at that period, in the 90s when I say, everybody was playing the move b4. So this was considered like the main move, and everybody was playing this, but this was not to my liking at all, because it was just too chaotic and messy. Knight f4 is possible, knight d5 is possible, gf6 is possible, knight e2 was possible, and the variations were crazy and really not something that I was attracted to. To my pleasant surprise, I discovered that Fischer played knight h5, a move that was condemned by theory in the 90s. And the reason for this is that after knight d5, black is forced to take on d5 because knight d7 is threatened, and then the pawn on d6 falls. So bishop d5, e d5. And it was considered that this position was better for white. Fischer played the automatic move rook c8. Yeah? But after bishop h3, a very strong move, pinpointing the problems in black's position, which are the weak light squares, c6 in particular. And this is as a result of the exchange of the light squared bishop on d5 on the previous move. So after bishop h3, Fischer played rook c7 to avoid the pin, but after knight a5, he was positionally busted. It's worth taking a look a bit further of this game, as it actually gave me an idea. So the game went knight b8, covering the c6 square, but it's already clear that black is going to lose some material thanks to this bishop b6 pin. Bern first improved the position, bishop g4, attacking the knight, knight f4, h4, and now Fischer played the move f5, which after gf6, bishop f6, bishop b6 led to a loss of an exchange. Fischer was lost, but Fischer being Fischer, he even managed to win this game. So when looking at this game, I was thinking, okay, how can I improve? And this is the method actually I was using. You see, elite players, best players, they never play rubbish in the opening. So when something goes bad for them in the opening, it's not because the opening or the variation was bad per se. It's more likely that they either forgot their preparation, they messed up their preparation, or for whatever reason. But the likelihood that the variation is actually good is pretty high. So starting from this line of reasoning, I was started to think, and then my question here and trying to understand what happened was that after ed5, I realized that the problems for black were the light squares. And especially this move rook c8 felt kind of out of place because it just helped white to get the bishop to h3, pinning the knight on d7, and the rook on c8 is not on the best square. It didn't take me long to figure out the improvement. So instead of rook c8, I just said to myself, okay, why not just play f5 immediately? It makes a lot of sense. Now bishop h3 makes no sense because the pawn is already there. The move f5 also takes control over some light squares, for example e4, which can be useful for white at some later stages, for example by bishop d3, bishop e4, or knight d2, knight e4. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that, the most concrete one, it threatens f4 to win the pawn on g5. So I said, okay, let's try this. So the method being, obviously, trying to improve on the game by the strong player. And this is what I did here. So I started analyzing f5. The most logical move, obviously, is to take on f6. But I also understood that the problem of the light squares may not be entirely solved. So I also checked the lines with knight a5. So knight a5 threatening knight c6. I also checked move like h4 and rook g1. Now, you can imagine that in the 90s, the engines were not even close to where they are today, and I barely used them, maybe for some elementary blunder checks. So mostly I did my analysis on my own. Understandably, that analysis was far from perfect, to say the least. But even this being the case, as I started employing this variation with f5, it turned out that I was way ahead of my opponents. The reason for this was twofold. One, because the variation was not popular at all, so nobody was paying attention to it, which was great. I was in fact employing another idea here, which was the Botvinnik's idea that you should always have your own theory, which are lines where you have your own opinion, and that opinion differs from the mainstream opinion. And in this case, the mainstream opinion was that the line is bad for black. I discovered an improvement and tried to prove that that was wrong. And the second point was that I analyzed this. So in spite of my analysis not being perfect, I was still ahead of them. I still had some idea how the game can develop. I had quite a few games starting from the 90s, mid 90s here, and I usually had very good results. For example, the move knight a5, which I didn't expect would be too often played. It was actually played against me by Grandmaster Todorovic, and after f5, bishop f2, bishop g5, knight c6, now I analyzed both queen f6 and queen e8. I actually won a very messy game against him. Still, the most commonly played move after f5 was gf6, and here I thought that best is bishop f6. Later, when this variation slowly got some traction, black players also started taking with the rook, but that was never really to my liking. I thought that the bishop is very well placed on f6, especially as black's plan is to go knight f4 on the next move. So with the knight on f4, then bishop f4 is discouraged, as after ef4 the bishop suddenly becomes a very good piece. So I analyzed this quite a lot, and after analyzing, I actually came to understand the essence of the position for black, and that was that there are two factors here at play. One is white's unopposed light squared bishop. The ideal square for that bishop is e4 square. Why e4? Well, because from e4 the bishop is very solid, defends f3, which is actually a weak pawn on the f file, yeah, and also strengthens the e4, the d5 pawn. Connected with this is the weakness of the c6 square. So surprising as it may sound, in fact, in this variation of the English attack, White never really plays for an attack on the king side. White actually tries to play on the queen side and go king b1, c4, and in view of all these domination of on the light squares, tries to play on the queen side. So putting these two together, I realized that here already, after bishop takes f6, play is actually very concrete. Now, if White plays some sort of a neutral move, let's say like king b1, then Black must follow with knight f4. And the reason for knight f4 is to limit the bishop on f1. So now, if the bishop comes to d3, intending bishop e4, that bishop must be taken. As nice as the knight looks on f4, that bishop must be taken. And the reason for this is that after that bishop is taken, f3 becomes a very pleasant target for Black. So if White understands this, okay, and even like a move like knight a5 also should be met by knight f4, and that bishop should never find its way to e4. In fact, I realized this, the importance of the bishop coming to e4 after I lost a game to Alexander Motilyov in 2001, I think. So you can see that the process of understanding of what the position is all about was rather gradual, well, lacking engines and working on my own. Well, it wasn't, I guess, that easy. The second factor is that if White starts with bishop d3, now bishop e4 is coming, yeah? Then the thing that Black needs to do is to stop the knight from coming to c6. So after knight f4, threatening taking the bishop, bishop e4, a5 is the key move. So the bishop made it to e4, but the knight is not going to make it to c6. So Black prevents both positional ideas. Yeah, or at least always prevents at least one of these positional ideas. And basically this was the whole understanding that I acquired over the years by analyzing the variation. It took a very long time for this variation to take off. In fact, it was on the sidelines of theory for many years, which I was very happy about because that worked in my favor. It was a line nobody prepared against, so I was always having this psychological advantage whenever I played it. That worked for me for a very long time, but eventually the strongest players picked it up, and for example, it was already played extensively in the I think it was the either Berlin candidates or the Moscow candidates, 2014 or 2016 or 2018, one of these candidates. There were some really high-level games between Caruana and Mamedyarov. So it was, well, it really served me well for many years, I would say even decades. But all good things come to an end, as they say. Nowadays, the variation is very well explored. It's recognized as a good way for Black to deal with the English attack. Well, and okay, at least I could say that I was happy to be, if not the first, I'm pretty sure among the first ones to understand the value of the variation and this improvement f5, which I'm quite proud of, improving of a game on a game by Fischer. So it was a let's say a pleasant experience and a small contribution of mine to the theory of chess openings. So to conclude, whenever you feel like you need to choose a line or you want to choose an opening, one method which really works well is to check the games of the best players and then not just follow blindly, but try to improve on these games. Try to find perhaps a sideline, try to find a let's say a less explored line which you can analyze yourself and then employ it as you could see in my example, it will give you a huge psychological and practical advantage because you would be already one step ahead of your opposition. Well, I hope this was useful to you as a practical example how to build a repertoire, choose a line, choose a sideline, perhaps a variation. And I think it's not a very difficult method, and I'm pretty sure you can employ it in your own opening explorations. I thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you soon.